Hello and welcome to Strange Stories. It's great to have you here. We are all about sharing stories of near-death experiences from around the world in the hopes of bringing some light and inspiration to your day. Our daily videos offer a glimpse into what lies beyond this life, and we believe that they can help us all appreciate the gift of life a little bit more. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to stay up to date on all of our latest videos. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue to grow. And to our returning viewers, welcome back. We're thrilled to have you with us again. So go ahead, grab a cozy blanket, get comfy, and join us for today's incredible near-death experience story.
Story number 1. I was 8 years old and I was playing outside the family house about 10 meters away from the back porch. It was late in the morning before lunch, maybe 11 a.m. I was alone and wasting time before the luncheon. I was getting bored. My mother was cooking in the kitchen. My father had just purchased an industrial freezer and the door was propped open with a plank of wood. I crouched inside the freezer and walked to the back. The freezer unit wobbled. The plank fell and the door shut and locked as I did so. It was pitch black outside and the air smelled musty. I tried but failed to open the door. I was terrified and slumped down the back left corner. I soon found myself struggling to breathe and my chest tightening. I was afraid I was going to die. I recall putting my hand over my eyes and preparing to die. Then I was outside of my body and above the porch in the freezer. I recall looking down on my father and clearly hearing both his and my mother's voices. I was quite high up and could see the entire backyard as well as the freezer with the door closed. "Where's Jane?" my father asked my mother. "Outside playing," my mother replied. "Where?" he inquired. He exited the kitchen and stood on the porch staring. I was above the porch, looking down, and I wished and wished for my father to come and find me. "Please find me," I remember thinking. He looked out the window and saw the freezer door close. He dashed to the freezer, and the next thing I know, I'm being dragged out. I wasn't fully awake. My father quickly carried me to the kitchen in his arms, and I remember taking my first full breath of fresh air, which was wonderful. He sat me down in the kitchen just inside the back door. I was perplexed and shocked, and there was some commotion. My father was both relieved and surprised. He recommended that I drink some water and be taken into my parents' bedroom to lie down and rest. He quickly left and removed the freezer door. I recall lying on my father's bed, resting and feeling confused and scared. My father went off to remove the door, and my mother went off to finish her lunch preparations and housework. Everything appeared to be going as usual. I felt like I needed more love and attention. Nothing was said about this event, and I've never told my parents about it. My father died in March 2016, and I've never told him about it. I intended to contact my mother at some point in the future. As a child, my feelings and thoughts were as follows. 1. I was angry that my father had been stupid enough not to remove the door earlier. And 2. I sensed my mother was angry that I'd wandered into the freezer. I had the impression that she wished I hadn't lived, and my relationship with my mother was strained from then on. Overall, I felt that my trust in my parents had dwindled. I never thought this experience was or could be classified as an NDE until recently, but it has recently become very significant. I basically pushed the memory away and have only recently been able to reconnect with it. As a young adult, I couldn't have anything put over my face and I wouldn't let anyone touch my head or face. I would frequently wake up from sleep, convinced that I was suffocating, only to discover that my duvet cover was covering my face. I've panicked once or twice about being locked in a room. For example, on a train in the restroom, and once in a musical practice room where the caretaker locked the doors without checking to see if students were present. I also became afraid of deep water. The worst part was the fear of dying. As a child, while sleeping in bed in the dark, I noticed my heart rate and breathing rate slowing and feared I would die. Death has long been a source of anxiety for me, especially at night, and I've struggled with sleeping disorders. I sought therapy 2 years ago, and my disrupted sleeping has now improved, and I can say that I no longer have an extreme fear of death. I am the happiest I've ever been at the age of 59. After reading Raymond Moody, I'm currently researching the afterlife, and I'm constantly wondering what happens after we die. I learned about the IANDS after watching a DVD film, Afterlife, in which Raymond Moody was interviewed. The film, Afterlife, has had a profound effect on me. I sense a deep change occurring within me in the sense that I now feel my life has a purpose, that I'm now aware of unconditional love, and that I need to live life as I am, as a curious human being who has experienced something very important, and this realization is ultimately liberating me from a lot of unhappiness. It was confusing and frightening for me as a child to experience near suffocation. I'm only now, much later in life, realizing the significance of what happened. Story number 2. February 8, 2017, I was admitted to a Detroit hospital for a subchronic hematoma, or SCH, a blood clot attached to the placenta. During my 4th pregnancy, I was 24 weeks pregnant and in preterm labor due to the SCH. If the bleeding is not detected and stopped during birth, it can be fatal for both mother and baby. I've spent nearly a month on the labor and delivery or maternity floor being monitored and on complete bed rest until the baby arrived. Every day until my delivery, on March 7th, I was in active labor via emergency C-section. My SCH ruptured and I was losing amniotic fluid, forcing my daughter to be born at 29 weeks. My daughter was delivered after I was taken to the operating room and given a spinal. She arrived crying and was quickly whisked away to the NICU. She survived and is doing well. And this is where things go wrong. The placenta shredded and tore my uterine wall, causing massive bleeding. 2 nurses were counting sponges and repeating the number back and forth. Another nurse told me to breathe and asked if I was all right. I remember looking over at my husband and thinking that this was taking an eternity. What's taking so long? I'd lost track of the sponge count after it reached 50. I overheard the nurse telling my husband that he should come wait in the waiting room before going up to see our daughter because it would be a while. He resisted a little, but he held my hand and we both said I love you, and as he walked out the door, I wondered why this felt like the last time I'd ever say those words to him. As the door closed and he walked out, I noticed my breathing slowing. I reminded myself to breathe. Pay attention to the nurse's voice. I started to feel like I was going away. My heart could be heard in my ears. I began to feel dizzy, but remained alert to everything around me. Then there was silence. There was no heartbeat, only a loud buzz like the heart monitor makes when it goes flat. I looked around and saw that it was me on the table below. I noticed them performing what the doctor referred to as a Whipple stitch, and she was moving quickly as nurses pushed more sponges at the doctor attached to a long metal instrument. I remember feeling pulled away, but hearing the nurse say, "Stay with me, hun. You're okay, hun. Are you all right?" Then a bright white light smacked me across the face. I've never felt such warmth, like a big fuzzy blanket of warmth. I recall feeling an outpouring of love all around me. It's all about love. This light and love are beyond words. For what seemed like an eternity, I basked in this warmth and love. I couldn't stop thinking about it. A single butterfly then flew into the light. Only one. Then a voice from the warm light said, "I know it's beautiful here, but you can't stay. You want to, but you can't." I recognized the voice as that of my best friend's mother, who died in October 2015. When she died, I was by her side and asked her to put in a good word for us to have a daughter. We did. She was speaking to me, and the words were coming from this big ball of light. No face, just her voice, which I recognized. She continued saying, "Please go back. Your boys need you. Your husband needs you, and the beautiful baby girl needs her mama. Say hello to my girls and send them a hug and kiss from me. Tell them I'm fine and that they will be as well. But this is so beautiful. The light, warmth, and beauty within the light were more than earth could ever be. I didn't want to go back, but I felt like I was being sucked back into the darkness as I was thinking this. It felt like I was being sucked back into my body in reverse. I awoke with the assurance that I would live and get through this. When I awoke from my experience, I remembered feeling pain again. I had never felt such excruciating pain in my life. The anesthetic was wearing off and they were still working on me. As I was coming out of anesthesia, I asked the nurse if she'd put me under, and she said, "No, hun. You just have the spinal. We can't put you under right now. We need you aware and awake. We are on the verge of losing you." Then I told her I was about to pass out from the pain. I awoke in recovery, surrounded by family, thinking I died again, but I was just exhausted from everything and the pain. The nurse told me several times that I was, pinching her thumb and pointer finger as close together as possible without touching, this close to having a hysterectomy because they couldn't control the bleeding. She said I was one of the very few people who survived a major bleed without dying, but it was close. I asked her how close, and she replied, "If I were you, I would get my medical records because your heart stopped for a minute there, but we got you back." This is the very first time I've written my story. I've only told a few people because I still can't process everything a year later without feeling overwhelmed. I began to withdraw, becoming angry at myself or my friends and family for not understanding what had occurred. I was such a different person at first. I saw life in a different light. But then I realized that this life on earth was so dark and sad, and that nothing could compare to the pure love, warmth, and light I felt when I was in it. I was prescribed Xanax for PTSD and medical trauma, but I didn't want to be on mind-altering medication. I'm only now beginning to look for answers, and this page has been extremely helpful. Some days I remember more than others, but the main points I mentioned above stand out every time I close my eyes. I'm so glad I'm here to see my children grow up and spend more time with my husband, family, and friends. Instead of always working, I'm more involved in my children's lives. I assist in delivering supply bags to the NICU for families. I make an effort to be a better person because that is what matters in life.